Here with us. And for the RDs, I have hit record, which is always something I forget. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeff McCutcheon. I'm the region director in the Southeast region. Today's agenda, I will share. It's a short agenda, but should be pretty meaningful. Today we're going to talk about the discussions going on in the infrastructure for the organization. Start off with, we'll have Roger give his thoughts and introduction. Yesterday we had, if you remember, to the state CED meeting in April, Roger invited any volunteers that wanted to come to participate in we've changed the name multiple times, but an input session to give feedback on the ideas. And that was yesterday, and I'll give a quick report. And then we're going to discuss the 5 questions I sent out to you Monday and again yesterday. And we're going to do that through breakout rooms, small groups, basically, and come back and lead it into a larger discussion. So with that, I think and with so many people on, I think we're ready for Roger.
Well, great. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you leading us into this new frontier of Zoom interaction, particularly the experiment, I think, in terms of using breakout rooms a little bit later. I think in the call, I won't be able to be on for the entire call, but I am tremendously complimentary of everybody, for really embracing using Zoom, the way you're using it today. As we were chatting when folks were signing on, I think we've got 3 full pages of people. So we've got 75 faces up there, at one time, which is pretty impressive, and just tremendously pleased with folks using Zoom. I think almost everybody in the organization has at least participated in Zoom meetings, and I think there's a growing percentage of people in the organization that have initiated or hosted Zoom meetings. So I think we have some wonderful. I think we're going to see some wonderful efficiencies coming from the use of Zoom over time. So Jeff asked me to spend a couple of minutes just providing a brief update on our efforts to improve our administrative infrastructure and the support that we provide to county-based extension faculty and staff. And I know sometimes you might be tired of seeing it, but I continue to go back to the vice president's conversation on the future of extension. And a couple of years ago, when this effort began in late 2014, early 2015, maybe even before some of you came on board, certainly before I came on board, but it was really an effort to and a challenge to the organization to build the extension organization of the next century. And the overall goal was to really ensure that we remained relevant and responsive. So I guess the first message today really is that this work we're doing on infrastructure is really not something new, but a logical extension of what we began with the conversation. And a lot of you are aware that last year about this time, we used the data that we gathered through the vice president's conversation to update our impact areas. So I think about July 1st last year, we introduced a new set of impact areas. And those impact areas right now, we've just kind of used those, on the tail end of our programming to organize our success stories and impact statements, for communicating to external stakeholders about what we do. They've kind of been buckets so far, in terms of the way we organize and tell our story. But is there something more that we can do with our impact areas? Can we do intentional design of programs around those impact areas? So And we also hope that those impact areas will encourage more work across program areas. You take one of the areas like health, for example, and we have independent things happening in 4-H, family consumer sciences, ag and natural resources, and community development that all focus on health but may not necessarily be connected. So, can we in fact use our impact areas for more than just buckets into which we dump impact statements in the future? This year, we updated our vision, mission, and values, and I think it's just been about 2 or 3 weeks ago that we concluded that effort and released kind of our new vision, mission, and values statements. And Jeff is putting those up on the screen right now with our vision of, and the way I described a vision was, what do we want the world to look like as a result? Some people have called it a word picture of the world we want to create, and we have built a vision statement that says we look for a world where Ohioans have the knowledge and resources they need to actively engage in creating the conditions in which they thrive. Our mission statement, down a little bit farther, describes what it is that we do. What's the work that we as an organization are doing to achieve the vision? And our mission statement, as revised, is we create opportunities for people to explore how science-based knowledge can improve social, economic, and environmental conditions. It includes both the direct education that we do, but by creating opportunities in our work to create opportunities, sometimes we're in a convening role in communities where we bring people and ideas together. And some of you have seen the tagline we've been using, the shortened version of our mission statement that says, we bring people and ideas together. And then our values define how we behave as an organization. What's unique about what we do that defines us or separates or distinguishes us from other organizations. And our values are teamwork and partnerships, integration of science and local knowledge, respectful community engagement, that we don't necessarily go into communities as the experts, but we are willing to listen. We value credibility, honesty, and integrity, innovation, flexibility, and adaptability. We want to be relevant. We want to be responsive. We take the dollars that we have from federal sources and state sources and county sources and leverage those in terms of with gifts and grants and contracts and other things, making our dollars go as far as they can. We believe in lifelong learning, diversity in all of its forms, and the contributions of all people in the community towards achieving our organizational and societal goals. So those were just released a couple of weeks ago, and I think Cheryl Buck is in the process of having some laminated or slick versions of those that will go out to the counties that are suitable for framing. So that's the second thing that we've done to extend the work of the Vice President's conversation. The first being our impact areas, and the second being our vision, mission, and values. So now we're ready to build the infrastructure that helps us achieve our vision, mission, and values. And we hope that,
I'm working on it.
Yeah, we can build a flatter, more responsive infrastructure that supports our people and our programs. And so before we do that, I want to share just a couple of things about this current effort to build the infrastructure. And we've actually talked about building infrastructure. We went into this talking about it as kind of a reorganization, and as you guys know, a reorg or a reorganization kind of has a negative connotation, and it brings up the idea that, when the going gets tough, we reorganize, and that kind of thing. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're really trying to just become a little bit better at what we do and build an infrastructure that supports what we do a little bit better. So we're probably going to be referring to this as an effort to build the infrastructure, not really a reorg in the future.
Just coming to say hi, Susan.
Huh?
Come to say hi, Susan. Just
An exciting conference call.
Hold on.
oh, my bad.
Sounds like we might need but before we do that, I want to reiterate a few key points about the work that we're initiating with infrastructure. Is I want you to know too, nobody's telling us to do this. This isn't something that the provost or the dean or anybody has say, you need to reorganize. This is something that I think the cabinet and many members of the organization say, we have to do some tweaks in our structure now that we've seen some changes in how the college is organized and centralized support units. We really need to adapt a little bit to be a little bit better at what we do. So I do want to let folks know that nobody's telling us to do this. This is something that we believe is an important thing for Extension to do. The other thing is, I think everybody's kind of figured out, is that this is not a budget-driven activity. There are states like Wisconsin and North Dakota and Illinois and Pennsylvania and states across the country that have experienced significant budget cuts of double-digit percentages. And like we would have loved to have a small increase or even a large increase in our budget here in Ohio. But, the reality is that we were flat, and yes, our costs are going up, but, this isn't, our budget situation is not dire. The legislators like what we do. They're very supportive of us. And and if you look at what's going on in Washington, D.C., to come out of that with being pretty flat in terms of our Smith-Lever appropriations, that's not too bad. And our county appropriations actually went up a couple of % this past year. Flat federally, flat at a state level, and slight increase at the county level. We're not doing this as a budget as a budget measure. The other thing that I think that we've discussed quite a bit is sometimes the folks who really get most nervous about these type of things are our support staff and our program assistants who already are earning very, very little. They get very, very nervous about, is there going to be a job for me? So the thing I would probably say is that nobody's going to be out of a job as a result of this either, is that everybody that's in the organization today will be with us in the organization in the future if they choose to be. So please help to reinforce that message, with people, is that no one's going to be out of a job. The other piece too is this isn't a copycat. This isn't a copycat move to become Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Michigan, California, or any other state in the country. Our group of folks that have been working on this did in fact look at some of the reorganizations or some of the restructuring work that's going on in a couple of other states. But I think I can speak on behalf of that group of individuals, cabinet plus the 14 people that volunteered. I think we all agree that there were some elements of these other states that were appealing to us. And we said, that's kind of cool. But then there were other things in the same state. We said, oh my goodness, we don't want to do that. We're looking at what is happening in some other states. It's important to know what's going on around us. But I think everybody would say that there's nobody that has the perfect model, and we're going to build something that works for Ohio. So those are some things that I think were consistent across the group anyway, in terms of feeling about, no, we don't want to be somebody else. We want to be Ohio. So a couple of months ago, the Extension Cabinet developed a set of goals to guide this work, to build this infrastructure. And I think everybody got a version of that this morning, and I think Jeff's going to pop it back up there on the screen again. But these are the goals that we're working toward on this Design Next project, is what we're calling it. Number one is to increase access and consistent and timely support for county operations and programming. And we know we have some challenges in those areas. And part of it has resulted in figuring out how we work with central support units and help them understand uniquely what we do in Extension. So, we want to increase that access to make sure that county operations and county programming gets the support they need to be the best that they can be. The second is maximize operational efficiency through an examination of policies, procedures, and organizational structure. As I've shared with some of you, things are entirely too complex and cumbersome to work at the speed that we need to work today. There's policies that were created a number of years ago that we're not sure are appropriate for 2017. There's some procedures that we go through that might include steps that aren't necessary. And, our organizational structure is very hierarchical in nature, with a director, an associate director, assistant directors, regional directors, and county directors. It's very pyramidal, and might we look at flattening that a little bit to reduce some layers. Provide predictable leadership to the process of coaching and mentoring extension employees, particularly those new to the organization. A lot of you are aware that, we really don't have a professional development strongly built into our system or leadership for that. But how do we coach and mentor new employees so that they feel comfortable in their new position and they want to stay with the organization as long as they can? Distribute administrative duties more effectively throughout the organization. We know that's concentrated right now in our regional directors, our county extension directors, but can we do some more things centrally as we move ahead? And are there certain administrative duties that need to stay at the county level? The next one is optimizing the grouping of counties in a way that maximizes team performance and program effectiveness. It's important to say that, as we've been talking about what those groups should look like in the future, we are not moving toward a model of multi-county educators that would formally be assigned to 2 or 3 counties. If that happens, where somebody shares their expertise across other counties, that's just fine, but we're not going to dictate, that we're not moving to a model where a 4-H educator or a family consumer sciences educator or whoever it might be is assigned to cover 2 or 3 counties. That's not the model here. Increase leadership and advancement opportunities for extension personnel, helping them meet their personal goals while also helping to build the organization. Our program development process right now is a little bit hit or miss. And can we build a program development process aligned with the impact areas to encourage work across disciplinary and programmatic boundaries, creating a more diverse extension workforce and building a culture of innovation and continual organizational improvement. So and by the last one, we're talking about not waiting for major milestone events of the organization like the 100-year anniversary of extension to decide that it might be time to look at ourselves, but to build a culture of continuous innovation and improvement for the organization. So those are the goals of the project. Now, yesterday, the Extension Cabinet and the group of 14 CEDs and educators who volunteered to be part of the design team met for the entire afternoon yesterday. And at the conclusion of the meeting, each person volunteered to join one of 4 subcommittees that will begin to put some flesh on the bones of some of the ideas that have been bounced around. And the four work groups or the subcommittees there's one that's really looking about what should our county administrative structure look like? RDs, CEDs, what should that structure look like? There's a second group that is working on how we provide better support to operations. Some of the things that in fact our regional directors and county directors have taken upon, because we have not had an associate director for operations for quite a few years. How do we support operations, streamlining and simplifying our operations? The third group is focusing on personal and organizational development, how we provide that support and professional development and advancement for people while we're in fact trying to become a better organization. How do we provide leadership to personal and organizational development? And then the other is how do we build out our programming aligned with the impact areas rather than just being kind of an afterthought into which we dump our success stories. So these 4 groups that have members of the cabinet and the CEDs and extension educators who have volunteered to be a part of this effort are going to be meeting over the next 30 days to develop recommendations regarding how to proceed. And what we've decided to do, this is one thing that we picked up from Wisconsin's work. is that when a recommendation is made, when one of these subgroups makes a recommendation to the system, it's going to be posted on the web, and there's going to be a window in which anyone in the organization can comment on that recommendation that has been made. We'll look at the feedback that we get on that recommendation. Cabinet will get back together, look at that, and then make decisions about whether to accept that recommendation as it is, make some tweaks to that recommendation, and then when it actually becomes a decision, it'll move to another place on that second web page where we will list the decisions that are made regarding the changes happening in the organization. So everybody can refer and check in on this web page to know, is this just a recommendation? When has it turned into a decision? So that's how we plan to kind of keep everybody informed of what's going on and allow everybody to make comments on recommendations before they become decisions. So with that, that's kind of the update on where we are. I'm going to condense the chattering I've done in the last 22 minutes or so into a director's drop-in for the county newsletter, for the regional newsletters to come out next week. So everybody will hear what we've talked about today. But that's the plan for moving forward. And Jeff, I'll give it back to you for any opportunity for comment or some quick questions. I want to make sure you have time to do the things that you need to do. But if there's some burning questions, I'm certainly willing to answer those as we move ahead. So Jeff, I'll give it back to you.
Well, thank you, Roger. Since you opened it up for questions, just a reminder, I've muted everybody who didn't mute themselves. So if you have a question, you'll have to unmute yourself before you start speaking. And always with virtual technology, you have to be comfortable with silence when you ask for questions.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Roger. This is Ashley Kulhanek.
Hi, Ashley.
I have a question. So you said over the next month, these committees will be meeting and putting up recommendations. Do you have in your head a kind of timeline for implementation once you have your finalized recommendations?
Yeah, Ashley, thanks. A good question, and that kind of came up yesterday in the discussion with the cabinet and the group of 14, is that at first, I kind of said, by the end of the year, we'd like to have, a pretty good idea of where we're headed. But it was very interesting because yesterday, in our efforts to become kind of a continual learning organization, is that, there's some of these things that actually get phased in over time, and things like that. Might our structure change first, and then we really look a little bit more about the impact areas. So, but I would like to say that I think I can still say that, by the end of the year, some things may be in place, but other things might still be in the process. But by and large, I'm hoping by the end of the year we got a pretty good roadmap for what things are going to be looking like. So I know that's kind of a squiggly kind of answer, but that's kind of where I am right now. Is that we don't have to be done, but I certainly hope by the end of the year we've got a pretty good idea that we would have a number of recommendations that are pretty solid and maybe actually have taken action on implementing a few of them.
Sounds great. I'm excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Let's do one more because I know you guys need to get on to other things, but and then I have an impending appointment here too. But anything else? Again, feel free to pop an email anytime to those individuals that are on the group, any member of the cabinet or me, and be happy to answer them. And particularly if you notice some things that people are talking about in the organization, and you feel like we need an update or something needs to go out, let us know, because we don't want to be doing this in a vacuum. Anyway, With that, thank you very much, Jeff. I'm going to go ahead and sign off and let you get on to things.
Ryan, real quick, I know that part of the questions will probably come up after we share the next section of the summary from yesterday. So if there's questions that we can answer, just to let the group know and to follow up with you, we'll be sure to bring those to you and give you time to respond.
Yeah, for some reason, that was rather garbled.
Is Cheryl on also in the same room?
No.
Okay.
I'm not
No,
even.
anyway.
I was just saying, if after we share some of the summary from yesterday, if there's additional questions, we'll be sure to bring those forward to you if we can answer them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Thank you for the opportunity to join you all.
Thank you, Roger. All right. Apparently you sounded very Darth Vader-like, Jackie. And one lesson I've learned is there is a button that only allows hosts to share screens and not participants. It's buried down at the bottom of the preferences. So, if you're holding a meeting this big, you might want to make sure you click that. Sorry about that inadvertent screen share, but that's now been corrected. So, all right. With that, I wanted to kind of summarize what what came out of yesterday's discussion, and it's still fresh, and we're still working on summarizing it. Let me pull up the questions so everybody can see those. But the group that met yesterday participated in focus group sessions, and these were the questions that were asked. First off, they were asked to think back through the last few weeks and and sorry, I was reading chat, but they were asked what's been discussed, what have they been hearing. Feedback was lots of questions, no details, and actually a little apathy. Been there, done that. It won't really affect what I do. Was some of the feedback I've gotten. And any of the 14 that are on the call, if I say something out of place, feel free to correct me. Then we asked, what do you think about creating multi-county units? There was lots of discussion on that. Depends on how many counties. A big push that the urban counties probably can't take on anymore. So that was loud and clear. But it depends on which counties neighboring. What's the criteria? A lot of both groups had said 3 to 4 counties would probably be somewhere in the ideal range, but it really depends on a lot of factors: budget, number of staff, interactions between counties, interactions between county commissioner groups. So those things are all things to consider. What leadership functions should stay at the county level? Definitely some budgetary control interactions with commissioners, and programmatic control should all be local. That was clear. Some of the headaches and paperwork that the CEDs have had pushed down to them came out as things that could be moved elsewhere. Next question was, if we create an operation unit, what functions need leadership at the state level? Interactions with HR, interactions with the business office, help with grants, not only proposal and finding grants, but also the submission of the proposal, and then some clear help with management of those were big things. If we create an organizational development unit, what functions need to be there? And part of that was the aspect of our professional development within our program areas, things that help us do our job better as county educators. A lot more coordination needed there. How do we integrate the 6 new impact areas in our structure? This created a lot of discussion, especially in the group I had. They didn't want 6 more silos. And how do they fit with the current 4, or do they fit with the current 4 program areas? Are the new impact areas going to change over time? A lot of them saw the impact areas as a great way to report to the community and responses from the community members in that reporting, but they're still kind of broad. And how do we do programs out of that? Others saw it as a great way to come up with some consistent programming with reportable results or impacts from those programs, tying evaluation to it, and being able to report things greater or beyond just the county level. Currently, we do a lot of programs locally that don't really fit in anything, and you can't necessarily roll the impacts from that program into a greater function. How do we provide leadership for the 6 impact areas? Again, this one created a lot of discussion. There's the signature programs and educators being partially responsible for that. Is that one way? Or I think the feeling was it needed somebody to focus on it and run with it, because they were going to be cutting across departmental and current programmatic lines. What are things that need to be considered from the stakeholders' viewpoint? How's this going to impact programming? What things are going to be more efficient? What things are going to be pulled off the educator's plate so that they can actually do the job that the community wants them to do? Those are things that all need to be considered. And think about the broad range of internal and external stakeholders we serve. How would you suggest we most effectively engage them in this conversation? Most of the discussions, we have to ask them. We need to purposely go out and ask as we continue. And one suggestion that I circled in my notes was that maybe we need to have a standard question we send out to all the counties that they can ask their advisory committees at their next meeting, and they report back the answers to, so we can get feedback through the county structure. But we need to engage them and then ask. And then topics presented today. What are we missing? That one was wide and varied, and I'm not sure I'd have a definite summary on it because both groups are very diverse. But they did identify several topics that we've missed and need to focus on further. So, of course, anybody that was there can correct me or add. Probably a nicer way to say it would be add, but I can be corrected. And just to remind you, I know Roger mentioned it. We pull this up. The subcommittees that are meeting outside of that, or that came out of that discussion yesterday, and I didn't get the educators down. I apologize for that. I need to follow up with it, but
we might want to remain incognito for a while, Jeff.
Okay, let's.
But you just said a summary. I was there yesterday, and I guess I left with more questions than answers. And then I want to thank Melinda for sending out 52 more questions this morning for us to ponder. And so, this is I think it's going to be an exciting process, but it definitely is. We've got more questions than answers at this point.
Right. The subcommittees, they're going to be discussing things, county structure support, operations, organizational development, and impact area leadership. These are groups that are going to be discussing, and if you have an interest in one of those, you may contact the cabinet reps, and see if there's when the opportunity to participate comes up. But just these are small groups. The discussion is starting. We're going to start working through those questions that Chris mentioned, and then be posting recommendations that come out of that for general discussion. When we listened to Wisconsin, that was probably not their structure that impressed us, but maybe that way of getting feedback from everybody or giving the organization an opportunity to respond was probably the best thing that came out of that discussion with Wisconsin. So sometimes you learn from those discussions. Sometimes you just learn little techniques, not necessarily their end goals, because they're in different places than we are.
Jeff, just to follow up quick, do I still sound like Darth Vader? Is this better?
You're better now.
Okay, great. So two things. One is the operations group. Really, it's focused around the business of doing extension more effectively, right? And so a lot of that's going to be in the context of these other areas. So for that work group, we're actually going to combine with and work with the county structure discussion. And so just wanted to make people aware of that. And then also to just really underscore, Chris, you make a good point. I think everybody left there yesterday with additional questions, which I think were generated by really good open discussion as related to the focus groups. And so I would encourage everybody to continue to have those discussions, right? And as I think it's important for you to know, I've heard it said before, two things when you talked about what you're hearing in the county. One is, this 2 weeks we will survive, or this too shall pass. or the concept of, it's already a done deal, so what does it matter? It's clearly not a done deal. We've talked about the global constructs in cabinet, and those were identified on the screen where Jeff had just had that, and all the focus groups were actually relative to that. So when you think about the project goals, it really is aimed at increasing the effectiveness and streamlining what we do to make your lives easier in the counties, and to offer additional professional development, to maintain lifelong learning and support for our educators, and then also being able to find a way to provide programmatic support in a system where we've kind of gone to some centralization of things that have taken away some of the historical resources that we had in place. So there's these general constructs of things that we would like to do to improve kind of the quality of life of being an educator, but also with the end goal of bringing value to the communities that we serve. And so there's this kind of initial skeleton idea of some constructs, but this is where the rubber meets the road, and you guys have a really good opportunity to put some meat on that skeleton. And so there are going to be a lot of questions. I think these work groups are going to be a great place for identifying some of that and having some input into what this final model, infrastructure, whatever it is, looks like to make it to work for all of us. And so I just want to put that out there. This is the time to get involved, ask good questions, and come up with some collaborative solutions that make this something really special.
Excellent points. Thank you, Jackie. All right. Next, this is going to be the fun experiment part, and you actually get to participate now. But I sent out, let me share it so everybody can see it. 5 questions. 5 questions. that 4 of these were shared with or asked to the State Extension Advisory Committee. And, you know, information about these will help make sure we as we look at this, you know, create a system that's actually beneficial to not only us but our clientele. So we're going to break out into groups. There's enough of us on. We're probably going to be around 12 per group. I'm going to do it randomly, so it you know, I'll let the computer decide, but I will stick an a RD in each group because they can record it. But in the smaller groups, we want you to discuss amongst yourselves, and we'll need to identify a leader and a recorder, because those leaders and recorders are going to come back and report to the larger group. We're going to try a small group discussion virtually. But the questions, please identify one thing about extension that you would like to see us preserve. Please identify one thing about extension that you would like to see us eliminate. Please identify one thing that you would like to see extension create. Please identify one thing that you've seen extension do this year that is innovative or exciting. And then specifically for you, please identify the things in your position that require high effort and creates low impact. All right, so when we break out, you will get a request to join the breakout room. You have to click yes to join it. And then the breakout rooms are going to be smaller groups, so you'll unmute and figure out who's going to lead it, because this random thing is kind of fun.
And then Jeff, you're putting in an automatic return to main meeting, right? So at the point in time that you cut us off, how long do we have? And then just for everybody to know that it will absorb you back into the main meeting if you don't.
Yeah, you can leave your meeting and go back to the main meeting at any time, but should we give a half an hour for that? Virtually, it's going to take a little longer than if we did it in real life. So at 11:15, we'll come back to the group, and I'll end all the breakout sessions. Power. Not really, but all right. Let's see, and this will take a little bit. Boom. Now I gotta get the RDs in each one.
And we're back.
Hey, everybody's back.
That worked really well. Good job, Jeff.
Did it? The awkward part, and if you do this technique, I share everything I've learned. Some good, some bad. You know, if you do this in a group setting, you can walk around and see what groups are moving faster, what groups are moving slower. Virtually, it's not that easy. So if I cut anybody off, I apologize. But you know, if you do this with a larger group in one room, you know that you always have the one group you have to stop.
The warning that you gave Jeff was really nice. Thank you.
Jeff, I'm not sure I pressed stop recording beforehand. Does that matter? Before you flip this out?
I have no idea.
I had the same question, but I figure it's just recording noise, right? Like nobody's talking right now. So
Nobody's in there?
Right.
We'll hope for the best.
And we had one person that locked up their computers. So, this is we're learning, and I thank you for your flexibility and participating. All right. So we had my report was we had a recorder and a leader for each group. Who wants to go summarize the discussion from breakout room 1?
Chris Shelby had that.
Yeah, so because I'm in the HR department, we put me in charge of recording since it's kind of a CED conversation. But just to kind of summarize, there was a lot of discussion. One thing that was repeated several times for all the questions was the importance of preserving relationships. So preserving relationships locally within the counties, preserving relationships with other CEDs and one another, so throughout we got that a lot. One thing in the first section, what do you like? We had flexibility. They enjoyed the flexibility to meet the community's needs. The ability to work closely with the community, work directly with their clients, work directly, with that community and cultivate those relationships. Again, it was mentioned numerous times by everybody, preserving relationships and supporting their local communities and local relationships. So I think I got all those. Do you want me to just go through every one of them?
Actually, let's better group 2. What was your response to question 1?
So first of all, I want to thank Rob for volunteering to facilitate us, and then I took the notes. New items that weren't already mentioned, maintaining that county office structure and the local identity, making sure that we're a people-friendly organization so that we're community-based, we don't overdo it on technology, that we maintain that balance between that and face-to-face. That we find a way to have more professional or a coherent way of making sure that everything that we put out that's print looks professional, it's easy to do, it's printer friendly. That we preserve not just the county-based educators, but that we have educators in each discipline, and that we don't go away from having that, and that we preserve state teams or projects.
Okay. Group 3.
Hi, this is Gwen. We had a very strong conversation over local connection. So basically a lot of emphasis on town presence, that flexibility to select the programs that meet your community's needs, some local control over budget, some program options, and emphasis on those county-based operations and staff. We also wanted to make sure we maintain that strong tie to the university research-based information and that identity of being part of the university, which is something that we thought has increased over the years and definitely something you don't want to lose in that restructuring. And we had some talk about being that person on the phone or being able to talk to a human being. That so many places people are forced to find the answers to their own questions going online or looking through a resource, but with extension, they can call and we're here. They get a human being. Let's see, did I get everything? Just a note that being able to connect more closely to our community and preserve those relationships will also help us when we have difficult budget situations or when we are wanting to try to improve or increase our budget. But the big emphasis was on that county or local driven programming. One person did comment that sometimes county lines aren't the best place to break programs. So it's not necessarily just county, but local.
Excellent. All right, Emily, you want to go?
Sure thing. Okay, so a lot of what's already been said, we definitely said independence and being able to choose programs based on county needs, continue with that local county presence. Also mentioned that keeping teaching as one of the priorities over other responsibilities, just because more and more things are taking our time, but we really want teaching to be preserved as our priority. And final thing that was mentioned was the appreciation of having a 2-track promotion system, since not everyone's desire is really to go faculty, and that allows us to keep teaching a priority for many people.
Excellent. And I believe we have one group that yet to hear from.
Sorry, I didn't realize that my headphones were up above. It was county-based funding for preserve and presence in every county to eliminate the bureaucrat, the red tape when working with systems. Program areas to specifically based, promotion and tenure process, annual conference, and to relax some of the branding rules. And current marketing process to create was a web or media presence.
Patty, I think we're going to go through each question. Sorry.
Oh.
That's all right.
It's okay. So what is...
well, why don't you go ahead and start with the second one. Create or eliminate. Sorry.
Eliminate. It was red tape.
Okay.
For getting things done. Program areas are too specifically based. They would like to, like if they say, well, that's not part of my description, if they only like to do one particular program to get them more, not be more specific, to be broadened on that. To eliminate the promotion and tenure process is just the factor of, I mean, if somebody else wants to, I was writing, so if they can tell a little bit more about that one. The annual conference was talking about how at the annual conference, there's not much of a takeaway sometimes when they need to have more information. They really like it's called Community Integrating Conference to be within more of the colleges, the other colleges, and to work with them. On the create side is web and social.
Well, let's get the other groups on the eliminate. We could go back to group one. You want to report on your responses to what would you like to eliminate?
Sure. Kind of like Patty said, we had similar things. He said restrictions on not allowing counties to use local vendors is very frustrating because a lot of times you can get things quicker and maybe even cheaper. We have restrictions as a university that we can use as vendors, and so that would be nice to be able to eliminate that or assist in some way. We did get one comment that said eliminate the CED role or be paid fairly for that role. And one thing that wasn't really an eliminate, but we kind of went off on this when we were there, we were talking, was when we're evaluating employees, they talked about how it can be difficult to evaluate employees that aren't in your program area that may report up to you, or I know this has changed, but the SNAP Ed employees was mentioned in the past. It was hard to evaluate those employees. So that was just a comment that was made that can be difficult. So, it wasn't necessarily an eliminate. You're not going to eliminate evaluations, but how can we make that better? I think that was pretty much it for our group.
All right. Which group wants to go next on eliminate?
I'll go for two. In following up on what Chris just said, we had the requirements of centralized vendors as well, with a focus on all that you said, but also that it adds to the goodwill spending locally. A lot of things around the idea of duplication of effort and a need for coordinating efforts, whether it's within or across programs. Specifically eliminate bucket thinking and And then another area was making one size does not fit all. So eliminating the attitude that all counties need to be staffed the same. We heard from both the larger counties and the smaller counties, where larger counties indicated they needed more funding to meet the population needs. Our smaller counties also said, oftentimes it's hard to garner that support with maybe the county commissioners or local efforts, so that we should find a way to deal with the funding deficit that may come from the state or federal match, and kind of reconsidering that.
All right. What other group wants to talk about Eliminate?
Okay, we were 3, and we spent most of the time probably talking about paperwork. So there was a comment, sometimes it seems we spend $20 worth of time to save 50 cents. And some paperwork and maybe some value, some value from that back for time versus redundancy in processes are things that we have to do multiple times. So one of the examples was impacts. So we record impacts in VITA, now would be our new system. 4-H folks are also creating those impacts in the ES237 system. And then we're also creating county highlights, that if there would be a way to combine some of that effort so that you don't have to do that same process 3 times in 3 different ways. Along the same lines of burdensome paperwork, we had a comment about central registration. Sometimes that central registration for things like pesticide training doesn't work well for the counties, and that they would be better off to be able to handle that registration just on their own in the county. There was a lot of comment on 4-H related things, probably just because of the makeup of our group. Every club having an EIN number, for example, and having to maintain all of the IRS requirements and things for that has become a burden on educators that we didn't used to have to do. There was a mention on T numbers, especially T numbers in Bridge Camp were expected to go. We have to go. Yep, having to do that extra paperwork instead of just be able to claim that on your regular travel. Along the lines, Chris had mentioned something about HR. We had a discussion too on evaluations, especially for support staff, that it seems like we try to fit everybody's evaluation requirements into that same square box. And someone like support staff have very different roles in our organization than a program assistant or an educator. And that maybe they shouldn't have to have such a lengthy evaluation. Sometimes just doing their job and doing it well is a great thing. They don't necessarily have to have programmatic related goals and improvements. Just continuing to improve their professional development and do their job might be good enough. Let's see if I missed anything here. Oh, and the one other thing was artificial county boundaries. That same comment we talked about a little bit on the first, that that sometimes we let county boundaries get in the way of what our best programming options might be. And especially in the 4-H world where we have to deal around fairs and things like that. But sometimes county boundaries aren't the best place to break a program. I think that's about it.
Excellent. And I think we haven't heard from Emily's group yet.
All right, so lots of similar things. Some things that were mentioned, repeating efforts that we've tried in the past but didn't work before. An example would be multiple county directors in the same county. Looking at policies that waste our time and effort. A specific example, the requirement to make a bank deposit every 3 days, even if you have $5 in, you still have to go to the bank. Stop mailing our travel, especially when we have digital documents that we have to print off and put into the mail and mail them in order to be reimbursed. The length of time to hire staff is too long and the process keeps changing, especially for seasonal summer staff positions. It can take, it seems like, almost as long to hire them as they are actually here as employees. Again, streamlined reporting system, which has been mentioned. Many committees are formed at the state level, but little action results sometimes from those. And we talked a little bit about funding structure for extension. Someone specifically mentioned another state where it was more state funded rather than locally funded. So if a county was paying only $5,000 per educator, would things be a little different from a county perspective?
Excellent. And to give you the first crack at the next question, that way we hear from different groups each time. You want to take the create question? Yes.
Sure thing. More funding to support staff, especially IT staff. This should be adjusted to meet an industry standard that is more like 1 to 40 or 50 employees rather than 200 or whatever it is at this point for us. Looking at roles for our county educators and having some kind of incentive or stipend for those who take on additional roles like EERA leaders, those who are in very high leadership positions for their professional organizations, et cetera. Maybe we could get better participation in that if there was some kind of incentive to do it. More support for social media changes and expectations. Especially having a regional marketing expert. It takes our time to develop these things. Even when we have great templates, it still takes time to do it. And if someone is really savvy with that, that would be helpful to us as educators. Having more formal help as teachers, like formal mentors that are going to be evaluating our teaching and really providing good constructive feedback and working with us to be the most excellent teachers we can be. More opportunities for us to be together as extension employees. And we talked a little bit about how maybe it doesn't sound the best to say we want more social time, but we need more time to develop relationships. Just going to a conference and that's jam-packed with lots of great sessions to go to, but then never really getting to interact with any of our colleagues and go to that next level in a relationship can be very challenging. And then continuing to build a path for coaching and mentoring. Formal mentors are great, but do mentors always know what the expectations are for them? And are we, in counties where we're hiring program coordinators or program assistants, there's not necessarily a formal program for mentors for them, and so they're oftentimes relying on other educators, sometimes who maybe are not the best educators to be their mentors. And a final suggestion is to have a volunteer disciplinarian, someone who will deal with all of our disgruntled volunteers in the counties.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Patty, you want to answer this one next for your group? What should we create?
I believe Julie's going to go ahead and start with that one then.
Oh, no. My thought was I would help you with the notes, not the reporting. How about you, Pam?
Oh.
You want to jump? Maybe Pam will jump in since she led the group.
Sure, we're on Create.
Yes.
Jeff said, okay. A better, improved web presence and an improved social media effort through extension. Create a culture accepting of change, where people are willing to change and be different as we move into the next years. An app for VITA that would be on demand, that after I finish a program, I could enter all my details in there and at least get started on the numbers and the criteria that we need right then. Mentoring for county extension directors and mentoring and better support for new extension educators. Is that everything, Patty?
You did great, Pam.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
All right, Chris, what about your group? Create.
We accidentally skipped this one and had to come back, so I did my best to kind of create it, and we ran out of time. But so they said a lot of the same things that we already heard, but one thing that was mentioned is a couple of people said in the past they had regional program specialists that they thought worked well, so that was mentioned. But also, again, just to reiterate what's already been said, the educator retreats was brought up, and it said to continue to help CEDs build relationships with one another. And program and administrative support was also mentioned, having some of that, and mentors and those type of things. So kind of similar to what we've already heard.
Okay. Jackie.
We had some similar ideas, but some specifics mentioned. So We wanted more videos, especially as it relates to like YouTube, more new training and support for technology as it relates to app development, survey development. I like the way I think Bruce put it, calling it an aggressive multimedia and education center for on-demand and real-time access to resources. The idea of promotion and tenure that makes sense for AMP professionals, more onboarding for new professionals and CEDs, and then continuing focus on quality innovation programs and getting programs and products to market in a timely fashion.
Excellent. And have I asked Gwen yet?
You have not. I think it might be the last one.
You're the last one then.
Some of the ideas we discussed have already been mentioned, but I'll mention them again just so we realize they've been important to a wide variety of people. One was definitely a comment on apps or technology to support our work in extension. And a note that our websites are not very mobile friendly. So if people are trying to access them from a phone, it's not necessarily intuitive to be able to find the things that they're able to find if they access them from a computer. I personally would love to see a 4-H online app that I could use to quickly access data from the field, and there might be other apps that people in other program areas would appreciate to access data more easily outside of their office. If we're doing our job well, we're not spending it all on the computer, we're out with people. And so it would be nice to be able to put our hands on some of that a little more easily. The other thing along that line that we talked about was the need for some common questions for evaluations for programming that we can use. So some ideas would be something like a EET, but that we could use for programming. Many of our programs might have some specific questions, but the basic questions that we ask could really be lumped into some pretty similar categories. And that would save if we could just pick and choose or just print something pre-made off the web. Or a digital survey system where we could go in and say, I'd like to create this survey, pick and choose some pre-made questions related to, say, maybe camp or related to an educational program, and then drop in your email addresses and send it rather than have to go in and create those from scratch if you want to use them. Some other things that we talked about that weren't related to technology was we felt like there's a way, we have great verbal communication in our organization where we hear things from our leaders and they're able to communicate information and rules and guidelines, but we don't have very much horizontal communication. So between people with similar positions across the state, often we're all reinventing the wheel 88 times or struggling with something that one of our colleagues probably addressed and fixed last week in their own county that we could benefit from. So an easy to use, searchable way of being able to see what kinds of programs other people do or ways of having, just being able to network and communicate with one another more horizontally. And then we did have a very specific suggestion that the AD be reinstated for the FCS position, that is a position that is needed and very much missed. I think that pretty much sums it up.
All right, thank you. And since I asked you last, I should ask you first. This past year in Extension, what have you seen that's innovative or exciting?
People are very excited about our new director. I think that he's brought some fresh thinking and encouraged all of us to consider new ideas in a more positive way, that sometimes change doesn't have to be a reaction to something bad, but that change can be an opportunity for us to improve. We also talked about, we had kind of heard through the grapevine from some other coworkers that we are now able to bring on a new educator before the previous one has left when you're rehiring a position. And we think that is something that could be very valuable, especially given the very, I guess, kind of detailed nature of some of our educators' positions. An educator from one county can't necessarily train the educator in the one next door to the intricacies of that county. We like that HR has recognized that not every county director is an HR expert and has put some effort into helping us with what we need to find or do. And along those lines, the SNAP Ed supervision being moved off of the county director's plate and onto our regional program specialists. Has been helpful to county directors and has also allowed us to be a little more consistent across the state with things like job descriptions or hiring. And I think that pretty much sums up.
Excellent. All right. Chris, you want to go next? Innovate or exciting?
We had Zoom was the first thing mentioned when this came up, so people enjoy this using this program and being able to communicate with each other better. Educator retreats again was mentioned, and then also Roger was mentioned in that too, that people felt he's doing a good job, and specifically pushing other departments that receive funding from extension and actually getting support from them and them assisting extension. Also, it looks like it was in the comments. I may have gotten it. I said regional directors, a regional program specialist for the CRADE, and I think it was district specialists and district directors. I may have gotten that wrong. So I saw that in the comments that are coming up. But similar things is what everyone's saying.
Thank you, Chris. Emily.
We also said Zoom as our first thing for this one, especially because putting names with faces on a meeting like this is very valuable. Interns, it was mentioned that it would be great to be able to utilize our branch campuses maybe a little more in that, but we've had some great talent come into our offices through the intern program and just some county-based intern programs as well. Great that new educators are going to be starting with, or are starting with higher salaries now. Happy that Ohio won the Raise Your Hand for 4-H contest. The simplification of the A&P process is especially encouraging for our millennial generation. Having 5 deans join us at annual conference was very much appreciated. And also excited that the next annual conference is going to allow us to see outreach and engagement university-wide and not just focus on our own college.
Great, thank you. Pam, Patty, Julie, which one are you going to take on innovative?
Patty, I'll go.
Okay.
The efficiencies that Roger is looking at, and specifically paying for the volunteer insurance instead of all the money the business office would spend on billing each county. The Central State Initiative coming into some counties was exciting. The fact that starting salaries were raised is an exciting innovation, and also the Community and Engagement Conference.
Excellent. And Jackie, you want to finish up with innovative and exciting?
Not to duplicate, but I just wanted to underscore Zoom has been fabulous. The outreach conference and that ability again for outreach and engagement across internal, external partners. Internships was also mentioned, and then onboarding better, even though it's got a long way to go. It's somebody said 500% better than it was this time last year. And then Innovate Extension was identified, and then also holding departments accountable as mentioned for the outreach and engagement and partnerships.
Great. Now, you want to lead with high effort, low impact?
I would love that. Thank you. I think we got a winner here. Mileage reimbursement forms. Can I get a heck yeah? Okay.
Everybody's muted.
I know we're all muted. County budget preparation, seeing the value in it, but also not necessarily at this point seeing the impact or achievement from it. So maybe looking at that process. 4-H fairs and the amount of time and activities that go into that for the overall impact. Evaluation or performance process and how that's currently performed. E-requests within the counties, especially when you add in community nutrition, depending on how many you might have in your county. And then it was mentioned earlier under, I think, eliminate, but we have it here under high effort, low impact is the duplication of documentation with a specific identification of 4-H, for instance, what goes into VITA, etc.
Cool, thank you. Glenn, I'm trying to mix you up.
You're just keeping us on our toes.
Exactly.
one of the things that we mentioned under high effort and low impact were HR related activities, especially since some of our county directors will only be hiring somebody every year or two, and those procedures seem to be changing on a regular basis, and it can be hard to keep up with. It seems a lot of effort for so many of us to have to be trained in that, when that could maybe be centralized through somebody to do those HRAs or other create our position descriptions for us. It would probably be more efficient. Another thing we listed was club management on the 4-H side, which probably also has other things for other program areas. But there's a lot of red tape that we have to do or track that we don't really have a best efficient system for, that there probably is a better way of doing. So their financial paperwork, their EIN related paperwork, the IRS paperwork and notifications, tracking volunteers and handling volunteers for the annual required training and that type of thing. It seems like there's an awful lot of time invested for something that has very little payback. And then there was a comment, I actually had to step out, so maybe if someone wants to share more with that, but about having more units to support our counties with those day-to-day activities. And again, I think that was mostly a conversation around the fact that we kind of are expected to be experts in everything, and maybe centralizing that where we have, some people that help with HR, some people that help with purchasing would be more efficient than having 80 general specialists in every county.
Great. Patty or Pam?
Patty, I can add to that. We just had a couple and they reiterated what Jackie said. Fair management and expectations of our 4-H educators and the RIV P&T process.
Okay. Chris.
Similar stuff. Travel was the number one, and personnel issues, employee relations, again, HR stuff. Duplicate reporting, which we had here instead of in the Eliminate, which I think Jackie said as well for their group. Things like that. One thing I can tell you, Ivy, on the phone, I think our hiring, that's came up a lot, I think our hiring process is set, at least for now. We had to make some changes because of the electronic personnel filing system, but I can feel you guys. I've been here 6 months and it's changed, I think, 3 times since I've been here, but I don't expect any other changes. I know that's not on topic, but when you're on the phone, I think it'll be in place for a while at least. So anyway, that's it for us.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Emily, wrap us up.
So lots of similar things. I'll just add in a couple more. One is just that adding new skills takes time to learn. It's not able to be reported until you see the results later, but I think that's just more of like a philosophical type view that we all need to be in agreement on, maybe, is just understanding that that's part of our job. We need to be developing our skills. We can't report impact on every single thing we do. But that can require a lot of effort depending on whether that's a strength of yours or not. So if it's something that you really want to learn and is going to be a benefit to your county, then that's fantastic, and invest that time. But if it's not really your skill set to start with, someone else would be better doing it. Is that really where we should be putting our effort? And then just as a side note to that, we talked about how it takes a lot of time to facilitate programs. This is more from the promotion process. It's great for our county. It creates impact but for us personally, it doesn't add any teaching for us.
Excellent. Excellent answers to some valuable questions. I do have one request. All the note takers, could you send me your notes? I will. This has been recorded, so I can go back and make sure everything's covered. But I want to share the responses with Cabinet to these questions. But great feedback. Looking at the clock, we are right on time, which is excellent. Working in this breakout session virtually, I was a little concerned on how this was going to work and if we could keep the schedule. But thank you all for your participation. We'll actually,